The soft hum of the car engine filled the space between us as we cruised down the dimly lit streets. My wife, perched stiffly in the passenger seat, had her arms crossed, fingers tapping an impatient rhythm against her elbow. Please, just don't screw this up," she said, her voice somewhere between a plea and a command. I smirked, keeping one hand on the wheel while the other reached over to pat her knee reassuringly. "Babe, come on. I always make a good impression." Her head snapped toward me, eyes narrowing. "No, you think you do. There's a difference." I scoffed. "When have I ever made a bad impression?" She let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, I don't know. Maybe when you told my mom that I tricked you into marriage because of my deceptively good hairline? Or the time you met my old boss and immediately asked if he knew a guy who could help with traffic tickets. Those were jokes," I defended, turning onto a quieter street. "Besides, your mom does have excellent hair genes. You should take that as a compliment." "Not the point," she huffed. She turned to face forward again, rubbing her temples as though trying to will away the impending disaster she was certain would come. I sighed, realizing this was more than just nerves. It was a big deal for her. This was her new job, a fresh start, and she wanted everything to go perfectly, which meant that tonight I had to be perfect. "Okay," I said, softening. "I promise. I will be on my absolute best behavior. Charming, polite, and completely normal." She gave me a sideways glance, unconvinced. "Your version of normal worries me." I opened my mouth to argue, but before I could, we pulled into the apartment complex's parking lot. My stomach twisted just slightly, not with nerves, of course, but, anticipation. As I turned off the ignition, my wife reached over, gripping my wrist. "Please," she said one last time, eyes locked onto mine. "This is important to me." For all my bravado, that hit home. I squeezed her hand back. "Got it. No dumb jokes, no weird stories, no embarrassing moments." She exhaled, nodding. "Okay, let's go." We stepped out of the car, and as we made our way to the building, I let one last thought cross my mind. This was going to be easy. The door swung open, revealing my wife's boss, Marjorie, standing in the doorway with a warm smile. She was a sharp-looking woman in her 50s, dressed in a crisp blouse and slacks, with an air of effortless confidence that suggested she ran a tight ship both at work and at home. "You must be the husband," she said, extending a hand. "The one and only," I replied with a grin, giving her a firm handshake. First impressions mattered, after all. She chuckled, stepping aside to let us in. The apartment was spacious, well-decorated, but not overly fancy. A few framed travel photos lined the walls, books stacked neatly on the shelves. The smell of something rich and savory lingered in the air. "Please come in, make yourselves comfortable," Marjorie said, leading us toward the dining area. I took in the space, mentally checking off everything on the good guest list. Clean shoes, no unnecessary touching of objects, no immediate jokes about decorative choices. So far, so good. As we sat at the dining table, Marjorie poured drinks, red wine for my wife and her, bourbon for me. Good sign, I thought. She appreciated the finer things. "So," she said, settling into her chair, "your wife has told me so much about you." I shot a glance at my wife, who gave me a tight smile, probably bracing for impact. "All good things, I hope," I said smoothly, taking a sip of my drink. "Mostly," Marjorie teased, raising an eyebrow. "Though she did warn me that you have a, let's say, active sense of humor." I feigned offense. "Me? I'm the picture of sophistication and restraint." That got a laugh, small but genuine. My wife exhaled, visibly relaxing. We moved into light conversation. How my wife was settling into the new job, Marjorie's years in the industry, and my own work, which I tactfully kept brief and uncontroversial. The atmosphere grew more comfortable by the minute. At one point, I told a carefully chosen story about a work mishap. Nothing too embarrassing, just enough to be relatable. Marjorie chuckled, shaking her head. "Well, at least you own your mistakes." "Sometimes too well," my wife muttered under her breath. I shot her a playful betrayal. "Look," and Marjorie laughed again. This was going great. Then dinner was served. The plates were placed before us, thick, juicy steaks, paired with roasted potatoes and sautéed greens. I gave an appreciative nod. "Wow, this looks amazing," I said honestly. Marjorie smiled. "Glad you think so. I love to cook, but steak is my specialty." I raised my glass slightly. "To steak, then." The three of us clinked glasses, my wife beaming. "Perfect. I had this in the bag." Little did I know, that steak would be my undoing. The moment my knife sank into the steak, I knew I was in trouble. I had eaten rare steak before. Hell, I even enjoyed a good medium rare every now and then. But this? This wasn't just rare. This was prehistoric. I pressed my fork down and cut again, hoping I had somehow just hit a bad angle. Nope. The inside was deep red, nearly purple, and cold to the touch. I glanced up. My wife was cutting into her steak without issue, the juices pooling in a way that suggested perfectly cooked medium-rare perfection. Marjorie took a bite of hers, smiling contentedly. Meanwhile, my own plate looked like something that had just stumbled out of a field and collapsed. I tried to keep my face neutral, but internally, sirens were blaring. I had three choices. Eat it, risk a lifetime of chewing, and possibly mooing in the morning. Come up with an excuse. Veganism? Sudden allergy to beef tartare? Find a way to make it disappear. Option 1 was grim. Option 2 was impossible. I had already expressed excitement about the steak. So naturally, my brain latched onto the third. I took a cautious glance around. Marjorie was sipping her wine, unaware of my silent crisis. My wife was deep in conversation about something work-related. Then, salvation. Marjorie stood, wiping her mouth with her napkin. Excuse me just a moment. I need to check on dessert. This is it. My shot. I watched her disappear into the kitchen, heart pounding. Time slowed. The air crackled with opportunity. I quickly surveyed my surroundings. Napkin method. No, too messy. Pocket. Absolutely not. Then, my eyes landed on the large, open window just a few feet away. A perfect, clear, third-story window. A cartoon light bulb practically flickered above my head. If I was fast, precise, I could make this thing vanish without a trace. No one would ever know. The plan was set. I grabbed the steak with my hand, careful not to let any juices drip, and in one smooth motion, I launched it toward the window. That's when everything went horribly, horribly wrong. For a moment, I felt triumphant. The throw was perfect, clean, efficient, worthy of an Olympic discus champion. The steak sailed through the air in slow motion, spinning gracefully, heading straight for its target. Then thwack. The unmistakable, stomach-dropping sound of raw meat hitting solid glass. Time stood still. Instead of vanishing into the night, my nearly raw steak had just face-planted against the spotless third-story window. It clung there for a fraction of a second before surrendering to gravity, sliding downward at an agonizingly slow pace, leaving behind a long, crimson smear. I could only stare. My mouth hung open, my body frozen, as if I had just witnessed a murder. Then I heard it, the sharp intake of breath from across the table. I turned slowly, as if hoping this was all a hallucination. My wife was staring at me, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Her eyes, which had been filled with polite amusement minutes ago, now radiated a mixture of horror, disbelief, and something far more terrifying, pure, unfiltered rage. There was no escape. Before I could even think of a way to recover, footsteps approached. Marjorie had heard the noise. As she re-entered the dining room, her eyes flicked between the bloody window, the steak resting in the sill, my empty plate, and my absolutely guilty face. She blinked. Once. Twice. Silence. I felt like a criminal caught in the act. I had to say something. Anything. My brain scrambled for an explanation, for a way to undo what had just happened. What came out of my mouth instead was, I'm so sorry. I'm such a klutz. I don't know. I was just cutting it, and it slipped. I looked to my wife for help. She gave me none. Both women stared at me, unblinking. I had failed. Catastrophically. And now, I was going to have to pay the price. The silence in the room felt suffocating. Marjorie stood there, her eyes flicking between the steak clinging to the windowsill, the gory trail it had left behind, and my empty plate. I swallowed hard. She tilted her head slightly, her brow furrowed in a mixture of confusion and concern. Finally, she spoke. What happened? I panicked. Words tumbled out of my mouth with the grace of a collapsing Jenga tower. I'm so sorry. I'm such a klutz. I was just cutting my steak, and it just flew out of my hands. Silence. I turned desperately to my wife for backup. She only stared at me, her expression unreadable, except for the slight twitch in her left eye, which I knew meant death was near. I turned back to Marjorie, who was still processing my explanation. Her eyes drifted back to the steak, then to the bloody window, then to the steak again, then to me. I could see the exact moment she realized my story was absolute nonsense. Her lips parted slightly, as if she was about to ask a follow-up question, one that I had no good answer for. I needed to act fast. Before she could speak, I grabbed my napkin and lunged for the window, attempting to wipe away the evidence. Bad idea. The thick, juicy streak of blood only smeared further, making the situation somehow worse. I let out a nervous chuckle and muttered something about getting cleaning supplies. Neither woman said a word. Finally, I knew what I had to do. Defeated, I picked up the steak, placed it back on my plate, and sat down. And then I ate it. Cold, bloody, barely seared. With every bite, I felt my dignity shriveling up inside me. No one spoke. My wife continued to stare at me with quiet, simmering rage. Marjorie sipped her wine, and I chewed, and chewed, and chewed. It was the longest meal of my life. The rest of the evening crawled by in agonizing silence. I sat there, mechanically chewing my punishment, my taste buds waging war against the raw, iron-heavy meat. Each bite felt like an eternity. Marjorie made small talk with my wife, carefully avoiding any mention of the incident. I, on the other hand, sat in quiet exile, my only contribution to the conversation being the occasional forced swallow. Eventually, mercifully, the night came to an end. As we stepped into the car, I turned to my wife, searching for some sign of forgiveness. She buckled her seatbelt in silence, started the car in silence, pulled out of the driveway in silence. I cleared my throat. Nothing. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. 2 words. I'm fine. I have never heard 2 words carry such bone-chilling, soul-crushing, relationship-altering weight. I nodded solemnly, knowing better than to push my luck. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing. A text from my wife. I hesitated before opening it, bracing for impact. Good news, boss name, and I just had a good laugh over how much of a fucking idiot you are. I hope you know you will never live this down. Love you, you moron. I exhaled. Somewhere, deep beneath the layers of humiliation, I felt the tiniest sliver of relief. Sure, I had ruined dinner. Sure, I had embarrassed myself beyond words. Sure, my wife would remind me of this moment at every family gathering, dinner party, and social event for the rest of our lives, but at least still loved me. Even if I was an idiot,